Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And today we're dealing with Chapter 2 of the Queen of the Black Coast short story. This chapter I really like. I really love this chapter.
It was very enjoyable.
Oh yeah, and honestly, the characterization here. Conan and Belit at this point have probably been together for at least a year by this time. The Tigris has gone south, arriving near a poisoned river called Zarkeba. And Zarkeba is a rather infamous location, but the location where they're at is noted for not having many people around it. But there's some treasure rumored to be here, and Belit is determined to get it. The way Howard describes it is that Belit comes up with the ideas and the plans, Conan enforces them. Now this is on page 245 of the Black Book edition, and I found that rather interesting. She does not really go into battle herself. A lot of fans imagine her as a battle maiden. She is, but she's not as much of a battle maiden as some might suspect her to be. She's, quite frankly, more a schemer.
I agree. I got that impression as well.
Her and Conan get into a discussion of philosophy and religion. Conan comments on Mitra must be a powerful god given the amount of just emotional pull he has on people. That the people of Hyboria just adore him. He has more cities than any other god, and he has larger cities. And what's also noteworthy is that years later, when Conan is king, Mitra is one of the gods who does come to his assistance. That said, he notes that Set is someone that terrifies the Hyborians and is considered a very powerful demon, so he must also be powerful. It's in Zamora that Conan learnt of Bel, and actually came to like him as a god, and comments that he's actually a pretty good god, and that to Conan's mind, he probably does look out for his followers. But they also start talking about Crom, because Belit notes that Conan doesn't talk about his own gods. If she had ever heard him get angry, she'd know that he calls upon Crom a lot, especially when he's mad or in battle. In some ways, a lot of the misfortune that befalls Conan, I get the feeling it's because Crom's just looking down on him going, "Stop calling my name, you jerk! I'm gonna throw some dooms at you because you won't stop calling me." They're in a vicious cycle, the two of them. Although that said, in a later story, Crom does rescue Conan. And I do think initially he was throwing dooms at Conan out of irritation, at him constantly calling his name. But the way Crom is described is that he dwells on a great mountain, and what use to call on him? Little he cares if men live or die. He comments that he sends dooms and not fortune, and that he is grim and loveless. But at birth he breathes power and, well, he doesn't say courage, but in many stories he comments that he breathes courage into men, and the desire to strive and slay into man's soul. And that what else shall men ask of the gods, is Conan's question. Essentially the idea being, why should you pray to the gods to help you, when you should pray to them to help you find it in you to help you? So that way it's your own accomplishment. But that at the same time, the gods have helped, but in a lesser way. In a way, I can't help but think it's a little more respectful, because the idea is you want to stand on your own 2 feet. You don't want to be codependent your entire life. It's like having a parent. You know what I mean? Like, you want them to help you out, but not do everything for you. And this is a very key difference here. And I can't help but think that this is one of the most fascinating elements to Conan's philosophy here. And as much as a lot of people were wooed by Belit here, just this exchange between the two makes me think that Conan is the deeper character. There's a lot more thought going on between his ears than what a lot of people realize. Conan is a very intelligent character. Not that Belit isn't, it's just we get a lot about philosophy here and about striving and succeeding on your own merit. It's a very pull yourself by the bootstraps mindset. Conan is just, honestly, I love this part. But Belit mentions that her people, the Shemites, believe in Ishtar, Ashtoreth, Derketo, and Adonis and Bel. And that Bel was said to have been born, let me see, I think on page 247 it says, Bel too is Shemitish and was born in ancient Shumir, and went forth laughing with curled beard and impish wise eyes to steal the gems of the kings of old times. So Bel was a great thief and got deified. Whether or not that turned him into an actual god, who knows, but people believe he ascended to godhood. And she believes in a whole slew of gods and believes they are directly interfering and aiding and whatnot. Right there, I can't help but think that her philosophy and Conan's are radically different. She sees it as you pray to the gods to help you. He sees it as you pray to the gods to help you help yourself, in a way. It's up to you to help you, not to the gods or other men or women. Her entire philosophy, it's not bad. It's radically different than Conan. She's a lot more fundamental about her belief system. Conan is a lot more cynical. He doesn't want the gods interfering with him. He wants to do it himself.
It shows a lot about Conan's backstory on how he had to survive on his own.
Yeah.
He couldn't rely on everyone. He could only rely on himself and his sword arm.
Whereas Belit did have assistants. She has her entire crew and whatnot. So, yeah, they are radically different, and they're coming at this from very different angles. And at the same time, there's something thematic here where it's different. She is very female here, very feminine in her belief structure, in her views of, a parent or a god has to help you out. The idea is this is the right thing to do, to an extent, in a very feminine way. But Conan sees it as, why should I ask others for help? I can do it myself, in a very masculine way. Both ways have their merits. Belit's way probably works better with the female sex. Conan's way probably works better with the male sex in some ways, in just how they approach things. He resents anyone interfering. She doesn't mind it. So there's very different attitudes. He wants freedom, utter freedom. But I don't know if freedom's what she wants in a way, but she does like her freedom. No, she's a free spirit because, she's a pirate and whatnot. She probably could have found herself any guy on Earth and found herself a good, wealthy, fat king and wed him. She could have, but she didn't want to. She wanted to get by on the dint of her own efforts. But there's something complex here where she's not as attached to her freedom as Conan in a way. She is very attached to her freedom, but Conan's just obsessed in such a way that I don't think Conan would function in today's society. He would not like it. He'd probably go to the Middle East or something, or certain parts of Africa, because he'd feel more at home in a way in the violence and the lack of systems and structures. The way I see it, Belit is someone whom she could survive with the structures and systems, succeeding very well, but that's not exactly praise of her character there. She does have a good side to her, but this chapter kind of showcases her entire character development of this short story in a way. Enough about the discussion of philosophy here. Now, she ends up swearing her eternal love to Conan on page, I think, 248. And I'm going page by page because kind of need to. But this is after, of course, a flying ape flies by. Well, a winged ape, I should say. Some mistook it for a monster bat. But since it's not baseball, they've got to go with a monkey, I guess. I'm joking, I couldn't resist that. It's Nyaga who actually comments, a winged ape, and he says it uneasily. But we also finally get a detail about Nyaga. He's old. So I don't know if he's there to sleep with Belit or if he was originally a companion of hers before she became a pirate. I almost get a sense of grandfatherliness there.
I got that impression as well.
We only have a few lines with him, which is sad. I would have liked to see at least one of the crew members expanded upon. Now, what is noteworthy is that Conan has a crimson cape that Belit sleeps in, because she sleeps in the buff, because of course she does, which is a color of passion, and Belit is very passionate. She is all passion, but also of blood. Like, it's not black, which is a color of death, or white, which is a color of death in Asia, but red just made me think of bloodshed here. And that the handing of the mantle to her, when I say mantle, I mean like the cape mantle, or the cape to her, is indicative of almost like Conan would have been slated for death. It's like with a shark, like the cut is being transferred to her in a way. I could not help but think that. Now it's to page 247 when she confesses her love to Conan. She says, "My heart is welded to your heart. My soul is part of your soul. Were I still in death and you fighting for life, I would come back from the abyss to aid you. Whether my spirit floated with the purple sails on the crystal sea of paradise, arrived in the molten flames of hell, I am yours, and all the gods in all their eternities shall not sever us." This is a very passionate oath, where Nyaga and the crew are afraid of the winged ape. Belit's not all scared. She's enticed further. They end up discovering an island, a tomb, and decide to raid it, because of course they do. But they disturb something they shouldn't. She pretends that there is a snake, pretending to be scared. Conan searches for a snake to get rid of it. She lied and decides to let the crew kind of deal with the dirty work first, so she could have a word in private with Conan. She gets enticed by the treasure. The sight of it just seems like it possesses her. She starts acting a bit like Golem with the One Ring. She just stares at it, doesn't see anything else, and is obsessed with this treasure chest they found and its contents. So that Conan talks to her, but she's like, yeah, that's nice, that's fine. Yeah, okay, whatever. When people say, yeah, we're gonna have a hard time lugging into the ship, she gets angry and furious and flies off the handle, and even Conan's kind of like, what's the matter with her? So that he just decides if she's gonna freak out like that, he's just gonna go into the forest to look for the winged ape and search around the area. We are introduced to a sub-chief of the ship, Ngora. I wonder if he's a relative of Nyaga. I don't know. Or is it just, who's Ngora? I have no idea who that is. And all I know is it's sub-chief. If only Howard had put a bit more thought into these two characters. He does this every once in a while. He has the 2-3 main cast members of his story. Then he's got like the 5-6 side characters that he barely even touches upon. But there are times where he brings them back and fleshes them out more over the course of several short stories. Essentially, Nyaga and Nyagora are basically corpses. They're kill fodder, like in a slasher movie or something. This is just a small piece of criticism against Howard. And of course, we get Conan, who's poisoned by a flower, a black lotus, which apparently its juice can be death, and it brings about a dream-haunted slumber, as it says in the text. And it's actually a very chilling scene when it says, above his prostrate form, the great black blossoms nodded in the windless air. But then we find out in the next chapter, next time it'll be the fact that Conan is tripping. He's basically high and stoned. Now, although Howard fleshed out a great love interest for Conan in a way, she's in a lot of ways a reverse Conan. She's an antithesis in a way. She's a shadow to Conan, what he could be if he were to become obsessed with treasure and jewels and forget about his humanity. I know people think of her as just the be-all, end-all, and she'd make a perfect protagonist character. In this chapter, I can't help but think, no, she can't be a protagonist. She's the sort of character who gives in to temptation. She's like the one girlfriend from The Last Crusade in Indiana Jones. You know what I mean? She's the one who drags the Holy Grail and tries to take it out into the outer world where it doesn't belong, and falls down a cliff and tries to entice Indy to greed and whatnot. She's the type of love interest who's rather like Kitiara in a way, Uthmatar from Dragonlance. She's a dark shadow to Conan. This shadow lover is a temptress. Ultimately, the trouble with Belit is she is a hedonist, and she is consumed by her own greed. The treasure represents vice. Conan is not enticed by it. He does like vice, but he's more interested in this short story in Belit. She's his first love. Belit, between Conan and the idea of a materialistic life, because she was a princess when she was born. This image of vice that is this treasure, she gives in within 5 seconds.
It is fascinating how 1 minute she's telling Conan how
She'll love him
forever and using these superlatives like an adolescent would, and then she looks at the gold and she doesn't even listen to him. He's an afterthought.
Yeah.
Which shows that
in a way she is an adolescent. Yeah, that's what their love is. Adolescent love. Or lust, I should say.
And Conan looking at that as like, she said she'd choose me over anything.
Yeah.
And she's behaving like this.
He's still in love with her years later.
He's still in love with her, but
the thing is, you gotta bear in mind, she's one of the 2 great loves of his life. Belit, he never quite fully gets over. He does get over her eventually, and in that regard, I can't help but wonder if she's maybe a shadow archetype in a way to Zenobia. To Zenobia, there's no other man but Conan. To Belit, there's no other man finds treasure. She's rather like Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. And in that regard, I don't hate the character, I actually kind of pity her.
I was going to comment the same thing. She's pitiable.
But she also reminds me in some ways of Seth Gecko from Dusk Till Dawn season 1. Now I know there's the movie, but I prefer the first season TV series. I don't like the later seasons. They're not as good. Seth is a equally complex character, but it is a lot better, I find, in terms of morality to Belit. But I'm not trying to smack talk Belit. Seth is actually the character who looks at the One Ring in his show, that symbol or emblem of vice, and says, no thanks. But there's something that Suntinyco constantly says about Seth that's very perceptive on her part. Very perceptive female character, excellently played by Eiza Gonzalez, is that it's always about the score. It's not actually about stealing. It's not about the wealth. It's about the thrill of the crime. In a way, the relationship between Conan and Belit is similar to Richie and Seth Gecko, in that Richie was not in it for the score. He's in it for the end goal. Seth is in it for the score. Seth was always into it also to help Richie because he loved his brother. The difference is Belit chose the treasure, and that cost her her life, and Seth chose Richie rather than any kind of treasure or reward. So similar story, similar archetype, different end result. And we do plan to do a lot of videos about her because there's a lot that can be said about her. Hers is a tragic story. Now, in her last moments, she did pull through, but the sad thing is, where she is morally, in a way, superior to Gollum, or at least on an emotional and spiritual level, she's able to, in her last moments, she's redeemed, and, after death, she comes back and helps Conan. So in that regard, she's stronger than Gollum. She's a bit more like Isildur in that regard. But the difference is, Isildur, one should look at him as almost purely a hero. He just made one mistake, whereas Belit's, the way she dies, it was almost inevitable. Just because of the way she operates and she thinks and she responds to situations. And so, yeah, very complex, very good writing, very great characterization. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you were Crom dishing out one of his dooms upon any miserable soul who dared to pray to him and call upon him.